In early April of 1968, President Lyndon Johnson ordered an operation that demanded the cooperation of the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, and involved the deployment of over 15,000 soldiers in less than a week. The U.S. services teamed up to relieve a strategic base at Khe Sanh in South Vietnam, where the 26th Marines had been surrounded and harassed by the North Vietnamese for months. Soldier Don Sykes summed it up well when he said, quote, "I'm counting the days till I'm out of this godforsaken place." Determined to retake the base at all costs, Operation Pegasus was launched with the objectives of not only relieving Khe Sanh and reopening its main artery, but also neutralizing as many North Vietnamese units in the area as possible. The brutal battle became one of the largest offensive campaigns of the Vietnam War and would require all the bravery and faultless communication that the U.S. forces could muster. Surrounded. Khe Sanh was the scene of one of the most bitter fights in the entire Vietnam War. It was also one of the most publicized in American media at the time. In 1967, the People's Army of Vietnam carried out what the U.S. command in Saigon regarded as minor offensives in the border regions around the Khe Sanh combat base in the northwestern Quang Tri province of South Vietnam. However, they eventually detected movement of major forces in the area. Khe Sanh was mainly defended by 2 regiments of the U.S. Marine Corps, which was supported by elements of the Army and the Air Force, and by several Army of the Republic of Vietnam allied troops. Still, the U.S. had to build up its forces before the base was isolated. By late January of 1968, shortly before the Tet Offensive was launched, the strategic base was besieged by 2 to 3 division-sized enemy units. Khe Sanh and the hilltop outposts around it were showered with artillery, mortar, rocket attacks, and many infantry assaults. Soon after, the U.S. Air Force launched Operation Niagara to support the Marines on the ground, with a massive aerial bombardment campaign of over 150,000 tons of bombs and 158,000 artillery rounds, forcing the North Vietnamese to stay low. Meanwhile, massive efforts were made to keep the base supplied with several tactical implementations, including container delivery systems, low-altitude parachute extractions, and ground proximity extractions. The siege carried on through February and March, and Khe Sanh was attacked 5 times in battalion strength. In every encounter, the 6,000 Americans and their allies repelled the enemy, which was over 3 times stronger than them. Fierce yet accurate airstrikes and artillery bombardments kept the enemy at bay and prevented them from mounting a final attack. Even at night and under bad weather conditions, 2,500 B-52s pummeled the North Vietnamese, using the radar and Skyspot ground control targeting system. As the brave Marines resisted, tough decisions had to be made. Back home, the press compared the situation to the 1954 Battle of Dien Bien Phu, a total disaster for the French at the time. While the battle at Khe Sanh was extremely volatile, President Lyndon B. Johnson was determined to hold the base at all costs. Operation Pegasus. General William Westmoreland had ordered General John J. Tolson, commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, to come up with a contingency plan to relieve Khe Sanh as early as January. The only practical overland route from the east, Route 9, was impassable, but Khe Sanh had to be secured so it could be used as a jump-off point to pursue enemy forces into Laos. Operation Pegasus was laid out on March 2nd, the largest operation to be launched by the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force at that point in the war. While the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and the 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment launched a ground assault from Kalu Combat Base to approach Khe Sanh from the east on Route 9, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Brigades of the 1st Cavalry Division would assault key territories along the route, establishing fire support bases to cover the Marines' advance. Additionally, the 4th Marine Regiment would secure Route 9 to provide convoy security, and the 9th Marine Regiment would do the same in its sector. Moreover, the 12th would support the 1st Cavalry Division with artillery. Besides these, the 11th Engineer Battalion would accompany the Marines to repair the road, and the 1st Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and the 3rd Army of the Republic of Vietnam Airborne Task Force would also join the operation. Then, on March 25th, the order was issued to simultaneously conduct Operation Pegasus and Operation Con Tien Gyo Linh, a deception plan along the coastal areas of Quang Tri Province. However, enemy activities around Khe Sanh began tapering off, and the North Vietnamese army began to withdraw 2 days later. At 6 a.m. on March 30th, the deception operation was launched towards the demilitarized zone. 2 hours later, the operational control of the 26th Marine Regiment at Khe Sanh, led by Colonel David E. Lowndes, was passed to the 1st Cavalry Division, initiating Operation Pegasus. However, Westmoreland's relief effort infuriated the Marines, as they'd never been in favor of holding Khe Sanh. Moreover, they'd been heavily criticized for not defending it well, even as they did not consider the base under siege, and claimed it was never isolated from resupply or reinforcements. Even Lieutenant General Robert E. Cushman, Jr., commander of the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force, was appalled by the, quote, implication of a rescue or breaking of the siege by outside forces. Mobilization. Operation Pegasus was launched on April 1, 1968. At 7 a.m., the joint forces began their advance from Kalu along the route towards the Khe Sanh base. The 1st Cavalry Division combined ground and air assaults to clear the area, while the 2 elite Marine battalions pushed west. Meanwhile, hundreds of helicopters were busy ferrying heavy equipment to multiple landing zones. So many Hueys and Chinooks landed on LZ Stud that one Marine even wondered if every private had his own helicopter. Thousands of soldiers stood along the runway awaiting their turn, but poor weather conditions delayed the deployment. The men were to be transported to diverse areas across the Indian country, slang for enemy-held lands. Private Fred Woodruff recalled what it felt like being on the open-sided helicopter. Quote, "We were most certainly heading north, and that was not a direction to be heading in Vietnam." Finally, at 1 p.m., the initial waves of the 3rd Brigade of the Cavalry arrived at their positions along several landing zones close to the base. As the Marines cleared Route 9, the engineers repaired the route, 1.5 kilometers and 4 bypasses on the first day alone. Despite the weather, air support provided by 8 B-52 raids also assisted the ground forces. After a quiet night in rapidly mounted defensive positions, operations resumed at 6:55 the next morning. But contact with the enemy as the Marine battalions advanced was minimal, and the unfavorable flying conditions persisted throughout the mission. Meanwhile, the engineers repaired another 3 kilometers and built 2 bridges and 2 more bypasses. 5 of 6 airstrikes targeted the immediate vicinity of Khe Sanh. The Air Force, Navy, and Marines flew 142 tactical air sorties that day, while hundreds of tons of cargo and supplies were promptly delivered. On the 3rd day of the operation, the tempo picked up. As the ground forces continued to advance, the 2nd Brigade of the 1st Cavalry Division executed the air assault a whole day ahead of schedule. Moreover, almost every troop had secured their positions across all strategic landing zones, and they were about to reach their objective. Triumph. On April 4th, as the Marines continued their westward attack and the 3rd Brigade pressed on the enemy around the landing zone, the 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry assaulted an old French fort that had held President Ho Chi Minh and his wife. That same day, the 26th Marine Regiment deployed their first major offensive in weeks out of the combat base, and Hill 471 was secured in the afternoon by the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. However, the following day, the enemy struck first. The North Vietnamese attempted to retake the hill in a fight that became one of the highlights of the entire operation. At 5:15 a.m., they charged up the hill, but were met with mighty artillery firepower, and their effort was futile. Advances continued routinely, except for the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, which met the heaviest enemy resistance of the operation on the 6th. It took the whole day, but the Americans finally drove the North Vietnamese out of their positions, capturing over 100 individual and crew-served weapons. By noon, the 2nd Battalion, 12th Cavalry relieved the Marines on Hill 471, who opened a clearing attack northwestward. All the while, 15 kilometers east of Khe Sanh, the 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry was facing stiff resistance at the French fort. The 2nd Battalion came to the rescue, and finally on April 7th, the last enemy strongpoint between the American advance and Khe Sanh fell. The main supply route was reopened, as the retreating enemy offered little resistance and left vast amounts of new equipment behind. At 8 a.m. the following day, Khe Sanh was relieved, and the route was cleared and relinked. Rather than run the risk of similar situations in the future, the base was dismantled not long after. As the 26th Marines departed Khe Sanh, the 1st Marine Regiment took over. Then, on May 23rd, Lowndes and his regimental sergeant major received a Presidential Unit Citation from President Johnson for the brave actions of the 26th Marines during the months-long siege at Khe Sanh. Thank you for watching our video. Please give us a like and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels for more exciting history-inspired videos. Stay tuned.